Good evening. Welcome to Wednesday's class on experiencing the Buddha's teaching. And we are now at a module called Calm Abiding and Special Insights, which is actually the last module of this series, which is where I sort of follow a presentation, a very common presentation in Tibetan Buddhism called Lam Rim. In Tibetan, Lam means path and Rim means stages of the path to enlightenment. And this way of presenting the Buddhist teaching, what the Indian and the Tibetan Buddhist masters have done is they arrange the various themes or topics that are touched on by the Buddha in his discourses, what have been recorded and passed down, and try to arrange it in some kind of systematic order, so that especially for people new to Buddhism, beginners, and even seasoned Buddhists, as a more very logical and systematic way of approaching the different ideas and themes that are presented by the Buddha. And so, and in this particular presentation called Lam Rim, or Stages of the Path, it organized those topics, in different sections. Starts off with a foundational kind of presentation where it highlights the importance of the spiritual teacher in one's spiritual journey, the spiritual teacher as a source of inspiration for us, to inspire us to open our mind and heart and to reconnect with the wonderful positive qualities that we all possess. So sometimes we need to be inspired, to be moved and touched, and that becomes a kind of momentum for change, to aspire for something better and more noble, so to speak. Yeah. So source of inspiration is the first topic, and followed by appreciation of our own precious human rebirth or human life, to value what we have and to become more aware of the opportunities that having such a life at the moment, this life, what sort of opportunity it offers us, both in a secular setting, in a worldly, mundane setting, and also from a spiritual point of view. This life affords us an opportunity to bring about kind of profound change, profound transformation in the Buddhist context, the possibility of liberation and enlightenment, complete liberation from suffering and the causes of suffering. So those two topics are foundational, and then the rest of the topics are arranged in three sections. The first section is called small scope. The scope here refers to the scope of our motivation, like how far, how extensive, or how deep, And it starts from the small scope of motivation is where we are a little bit more. We don't see so far. I mean, relatively speaking, or so deep, so to speak. So we stay more superficial. We are more concerned at the small scope level with just happiness. And the aim of the small scope is or worldly happiness, you can say, is to inspire us to look at long-term happiness instead of being preoccupied with instant gratification, to stretch out our view and our plans, so to speak, to prepare for long-term happiness, to aim for long-term happiness. Of course, long-term in Buddhist sense is not just retirement, but beyond this life to future life's happiness. Yeah. And so the topic within this first section is preoccupied with that. So we start talking about death, which is a funny, interesting topic, because by acknowledging that there is an end point to this life, it really gets us to sit up and reassess and reprioritize what is really important to us. And the next is followed by awareness of future suffering, the possibility of future suffering. Maybe we are doing quite well now, but what about the future? Are we prepared for a change in fortune, a change in lifestyle? Sometimes changes can come to us quite suddenly, and are we prepared? Are we prepared, or have we accumulated a lot of conditions, the negative conditions that actually would really greatly increase our suffering when things change? So And the way to protect ourselves, the way to ensure or increase the chances of future happiness in this context will be the topic of refuge, which is a source of support for us at times of difficulties. Also, refuge gives us help to, at least in the Buddhist sense, give us a sense of direction, where to look and where to seek for genuine happiness, refuge. And the other main important topic in this section is karma, which is understanding the power of our actions and that our actions have consequences. And by making wise choices and taking wise actions, we can shape the future right here, right now, in each moment, and increase the chances of future happiness. Yeah. Then that followed by medium scope. Medium scope has let's go much deeper, beyond, not so superficial, but really dig a bit deeper into what is the true causes of our suffering, of our unhappiness, of all these unpleasant, miserable states of mind, and to dig a bit deeper into the causes. And here I will present it in terms of the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, the truth of origin of suffering, which in Buddhist context usually identified as ignorance that misunderstands reality or the nature of our life, and the ignorance then gives rise to a reaction of craving and clinging, where we try to hold on to what we perceive as pleasant and conducive to our happiness, and we have aversion, anger, or hatred towards what brings unpleasantness to our life. Yeah. So we have this kind of extreme reactions. And the Buddha pointed out that actually this craving rooted in ignorance is the true source of our unhappiness and suffering. And by putting an end, ceasing, stopping such craving and ignorance, we will find freedom from suffering. And I usually tend to interpret this suffering as psychological suffering, mental suffering, as opposed to physical pain, which is in and of itself, although it's unpleasant, can be very important to our survival. So it's not so much that we would achieve a Superman body where we don't feel any pain at all, but rather we will be able to free ourselves from all our psychological unhappiness and suffering. And there is a path described by the Buddha in this context that will lead us from where we are to freedom, suffering. So that is the medium scope, and we are more preoccupied with our individual freedom from suffering. And the great scope, the last section, as the name implies, great here is more in terms of the extension of it. So we are not only concerned with our own happiness, long-term and ultimate happiness, but we are also concerned of the plight of others, all sentient beings. So we are expanding the scope of our concern and care and loving kindness and compassion to include others, or in the Buddhist context, to include all sentient beings, all beings who are capable or who are conscious and capable of feeling pain and pleasure. And so we are now at the end of the great scope. We have touched on previously, we touched on how to generate that altruistic motivation, which is so characteristic of the great scope, or what we call bodhicitta, where it is aspiration to be of benefit to all sentient beings. And in order to fulfill that aspiration, we aspire to achieve the state of enlightenment or Buddhahood, which will fully equip us with the means to be of benefit to others, to fully equip us with the knowledge and the ability to guide others also to a state of complete liberation from suffering. And having generated aspirations, we embark on the path that equip us with the ability to do so. And there's the 6 paramitas, or sometimes translated 6 perfections, the 6 qualities. As I have explained, the word paramita means the qualities that enable us to go beyond our current limitation, lead us over to the other shore. The other shore is the place where we are free from suffering and the causes of suffering, the other shore of enlightenment. So these are the 6 qualities that through cultivating them, we, first of all, will be able to lead ourselves to enlightenment, and in turn we'll be able to share that with others and to be of benefit to them. So these are the parameter of generosity, of ethical discipline, of patience, of joyous effort. So those are what I covered in the previous module. And in this module, we look at the parameter of concentration and the parameter of wisdom. And parameter of concentration is also called, in this case, the accomplishment of the mind of calm abiding. The calm abiding is a more specific term to describe the state of mind we try to cultivate under parameter of concentration. It's a mind of meditative absorption, where our attention is able to concentrate, engage fully with whatever it is we are meditating on or whatever it is we want to focus on, and is free from distraction, free from agitation. It's also free from downers, laxity and lethargy. So it's a mind that is vibrant and vivid and alert and aware, and yet at the same time very at peace, very calm, and even accompanied by an experience of bliss as well. So it's a very pleasant state of mind, which is where the mind is very serviceable, very malleable. It will do what we want it to do, and it wouldn't sort of create trouble for ourselves. Yeah. So on the basis of that, we also cultivate the next parameter, which is the parameter of wisdom, or in this context, we call it special insight. Because this wisdom, this is a specific kind of wisdom. There, of course, there are different types of wisdom. This is a wisdom which has gained penetrative insight into reality, into the nature of our life, into the nature of happiness and suffering. And so this is the wisdom that can really guide ourselves and also guide others, to arrive at the other shore, that would take us from where we are and help us transcend our current limitations, help us be free from our inner sources of suffering, to arrive at the so-called, it's not so much a place, but a state of a genuine peace and happiness. Yeah. And the word insight here refers to a kind of a seeing, the word sight. So it's a seeing, or I would tend to translate as a perspective, a shift in our perspective. So previously we have always been preoccupied. We see the world, from this particular angle, and in other words, the world appears to us in a particular way, and we react to it. And now what happened is, with the cultivation of wisdom, we gain a different perspective. We have this shift, and we see the same world, but it will appear to us differently because it's from a different angle. And this different angle, actually frees us from a lot of our old habits and conditionings and preoccupations and hung up. It's liberating. It's a liberating perspective. It's like you step from. I usually describe the old perspective as like being in a tunnel. We are trapped in a tunnel. We are what we call tunnel vision. We are very limited, and we see the world in a very specific way. And quite often, according to Buddhism, is a way of rooted in ignorance, in misunderstanding. We see one way of describing it in a very self-centered way. We see the world relative to ourselves. The self becomes we're very preoccupied with the self, and becomes so important. And paradoxically, this actually increases our suffering and distress. And when we step out of that tunnel, it's almost like we break through from the tunnel and find ourselves in vast open space. And then we look back at the same situation, and we have a completely different attitude, a different perspective, and we're so much free and liberated and more creative in how we can deal with things. And one of the characteristics of this new perspective, or different perspective, is that it's not self-centered. I prefer to call it reality-centered. You don't see the world in a very narrow frame from our own perspective. You can almost see it in a broader perspective. Yeah. And that's what we are talking about. So last week I touched on cultivation of special insight using there are different approaches and methods in Buddhism. Last week I touched on a method that rely on mindfulness, mindful observation, mindful attention, taking a closer look at the reality of each moment, the reality of our experiences, and really take a close look and uncover, some mistakes that we have been holding on to misconception and misperception also. Holding on to things that are changing and impermanent, holding them to be permanent, holding on to things that are by nature, they are not able, because they change, they're not able to provide us with everlasting satisfaction. We hold them to be a source of lasting happiness. We therefore set ourselves up to be disappointed. Holding on to things that have no unchanging essence or self, and insist that projecting onto these changing processes something very solid, insisting that they have some unchanging core within them. Right? So this, just based on this tree, that it's all about mistaken perception, mistaken conception, a lot of which are our superimposition onto reality, what isn't there, what isn't in reality. A simple example is, of course, in the case of intimate relationship, to project a certain idealized image onto our partner, to the other person, an idealistic image, which is our idea of perfection, onto a real living person. And the image has no bearing with the reality of that person. It's almost like expecting them to be perfect and ignoring who they are, what are their true characteristics and true nature. So this is setting ourselves up to suffer, because repeatedly we insist that they change, we insist that they live up to our expectations. And of course, it's impossible. First of all, the image is most probably impossible to achieve, impossible to accomplish. And secondly, the image tends to ignore what is present here. It's not aligned with reality anyway. And so this is a very common thing, this superimposition of ideas and images onto the various objects or people, experiences in our life. Ideas and images that are fundamentally wrong. And when we overlap it onto this, of course, when reality deviates and change, there's this growing gap and discrepancy between our ideas, our images, and the reality of this moment. And there's such a ginormous gap that eventually even our ability to deny the facts fail, and we have to be confronted with that gap, and it will not be a very pleasant experience. Yeah. So that method rely on mindfulness. Having said that, I also want to point out that although if you were to, it's from the Theravada tradition of Buddhism, which mainly flourished in the Southeast Asia, even in Sri Lanka, if you were to read the literature, you'll find quite often in that tradition, there is not much emphasis on reasoning, because the emphasis is on mindful awareness of each moment, and reasoning tends to be associated with thinking. Right? But having said that, I personally feel that there is a reasoning process involved, even in a practice of mindfulness. Although it's implicit, it's not explicit. We're not explicitly thinking and reasoning out loud to ourselves, but our mind is fully capable of reasoning. Not necessarily consciously, but subconsciously, unconsciously, it is able to put one and one together and come up with a conclusion of two. It doesn't need to spell out in words in our own head, so to speak. So there is an implicit reasoning process going on, induction process going on. It is through a constant repeated observation of change that we draw a conclusion, which is a kind of reasoning process, a conclusion that we feel that we have come to verify and gain conviction in, the conclusion of impermanence. And then also from that, we draw other conclusion that things that are impermanent are not sources of lasting satisfaction and happiness, and things that are impermanent and of no lasting, do not provide lasting satisfaction, are also does not fit with our idea of a permanent self, a permanent self or soul, as people like to know, some kind of essence, unchanging essence there. So there is a reasoning process underlying that method, but the reasoning process is not explicit, it's implicit. What is explicit is the practice of mindful attention to changing experiences from one moment to another. Today, I want to touch on another approach, another method. And here, this is the almost not quite opposite, but very different. Here, it makes explicit the reasoning process. So it's a process, method which encourages us to think in a logical, reasonable way, to reason it out to ourselves, and in so doing, uncover our mistakes and help us to draw the right conclusion, one that is in accord with the reality or the nature of things. So this mainly derived from the teachings I received from the Gelug tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. In Tibetan Buddhism, there are 4 lineages or 4 traditions, maybe more, but these are the 4 main ones. Nyingma, Kagyu, Sakya, and Gelug. Gelug is the newest among the 4. So in Gelug tradition, there is a great emphasis on logical reasoning as a method to help us penetrate into ultimate reality, which is actually a very unusual thing in spiritual circles, spiritual traditions, not just Buddhism, but outside of Buddhism. This great emphasis on rational thinking, logical thinking, and applying logic, and they take it to quite an extreme. So the way to study quite often in traditional Gelug monasteries or monastic university, as they are called these days, through a process of debating out loud with opponents, and which is in a way like thinking out loud, with the help of an opponent, or which can be like I could be the one defending my position. I put forward my position, and someone would, in fact, a whole bunch of them would challenge me on my position, or I could take on the role of a challenger and debate with another person who is trying to defend their understanding, their philosophical position. So it is a very vibrant tradition, at least in the Tibetan monasteries, where debate is the primary means of study. They do a lot of memorizations, but the way to work through those material that they have memorized is by debate. And here in this context, we are saying we are applying logical reasoning in order to uncover our mistakes, in order to bring us closer to understand the true nature of things. So how do we go about this method? So there's a few steps. First step is to identify the mystic, I shouldn't say identify mystic, because usually they call it identify the object of refutation. But then I thought, let's not jump to conclusion, right? Maybe when we've reasoned further and inquire further, we might agree with it. So we call it identifying the object of investigation, the object of inquiry. And of course, in this context of wisdom, paramita wisdom, the object of inquiry is the sense of self that we carry with us, or the sense of self or essence that we project onto different objects. I will talk more about this self and essence later. First is to identify the object of investigation, to really get a good sense, a clear idea, what are we talking about, what are we looking for, what are we examining. Because if we are not clear about this, then the subsequent reasoning process is not so applicable or has no power. So first step is identifying the object of investigation inquiry. Second step is to establish the pervasion in terms of its existence. It's almost like I would say, all right, I have a permanent soul and changing self, a lump of thing called white chalk, and this is the one. This is the thing that is. If I have this, wherever it is, that's where white chalk is. And the body is not it. So when my soul is inside this body, that's what white chalk is. And when this soul left this body and plunged itself into another body, that one is white chalk. This is just a corpse here. So that is my so-called object of investigation. And so to investigate, really the investigation is whether such a thing actually exists or not. Then the second step is to establish what they call the entailment or the pervasion. If it were to exist, it must exist in this way, or this place, that place, and that's it. It's like if I live in this big house in the Buddhist Center, Vajrayana Institute. If you were to come and visit me and look for me in this house, then I'm either, if I were to be in the house, if I'm actually home, then there's only a limited number of places you need to look. You only need to look, of course, first within the parameters of this center. And since we have 2 stories, you only need to look at the ground floor and the first floor, and that's it. I mean, I might have climbed onto the roof, but that's quite unlikely, yeah. So this just the 2 stories. So you have established the parameters, the pervasion. Sometimes we say that if I were to be home, I must be here, here, or here. That's it. If you look at those 3 or 2 or 3 or whatever number of places, and you can't find me, then you can conclude logically, I'm not home. So that is the second step. You must establish this pervasion or the scope of the entailment, right? If you leave it kind of vague, then you'll find that you can't draw any firm conclusion at the end of your analysis and reasoning. Right? And then what follows is, after these first 2 steps, are the specific reasoning you use to establish whether there is such a self or there is definitely not such a self. Yeah. And this varies. The number actually varies, depends on the kind of reasoning, and depending on how many rooms you have established. You will say white chalk can only be either present at the ground floor or the first floor. Then there are only 2. Say first, I look at the ground floor, he's not here. Then you went up and look at the first floor, and he's not there. And then so only 2, and then you can conclude, oh, white chalk is not home. That's it. Let's say in terms of the self, my permanent soul that is so precious, and I'm trying to make sure that it goes from this life to a better life, to yet a better life, and so on, unchanged. Otherwise, it wouldn't be me, right? If you just change here, change there, it would be someone else already. What's going to happen to me if it's changed, isn't it? So usually, for example, we can say, all right, so I assert that there is such a self. Then the reasoning goes, well, I must be able to locate it somewhere, isn't it? Just like looking for white chalk in the house. I must be able to locate my permanent soul somewhere. So it's either here, in and among my body and mind, or it's outside of my body and mind. Something like we can separate out, and it has gone on holiday. Yeah. So it's either in and among the body and mind, or is separate from the body and mind. And then in among the body and mind, you can look for it among the body, the physical aspect of myself, or the mind, the mental aspect of self. So that gives 3 possibilities. Either the permanent soul is the body or among the body, is the mind or among the mind, or is completely different and separate from body and mind. So that is the pervasion. Look among the body, look in the body, look at the body, look among the mind, the mental processes, look at the mind itself, and look outside of body and mind for the permanent soul of white chalk. And if I have, so that's the entailment, then the first reason is the soul is not found among the body, it's not the body. Second, if the soul is not found among the mental processes, it's not the mind. And third, I can't find Wai Chong's permanent soul outside and separate from the body and mind. If I establish those three reasons, I can't find them, then I have to draw the valid conclusion that there is no such permanent soul of Wai Chong. All right, so that's the reasoning process. It's kind of straightforward, Especially, I like to use the example of I don't drive, but friends who has a car, most people in Australia have a car, looking for your car. You park your car at this particular lot, this particular space, and you are very sure that it is there. Okay, and then the next day you came out after you finish your errand, you're back at the spot, and your car is not there. Then of course we went through a process of searching. We searched through all the possibilities. Car is a big thing, right? I mean, it's not tiny. So you went through all the possibilities. I once was helping a friend to look for her car in the Sydney Airport multi-story car park. It's not funny, that one. Yeah, she forgot where she parked her car. Yeah. So if you were to, in the case of looking for your car, look to all the possibilities, and finally you might come to a horrifying conclusion that your car has been stolen. It's gone. It's not here anymore. Then you have to take the step of get a police report and so on and so forth. Yeah. So the end conclusion in that example, which I hope never happened to you, is that the car is not here anymore. The car is nowhere to be found. The car is lost, it's stolen. Right? In this example of the self, it's similar. And that one has a certain emotional impact, isn't it? It's not fun to have your car been stolen. So likewise, this one, the conclusion is, I don't have a permanent, unchanging soul. It's also no fun. It should have a certain emotional impact. I don't know how I want to react to it, but I probably wouldn't take to it too nicely. In the teaching, it says that when you come to this conclusion, and it's an impactful, genuine conclusion, impactful one, you will feel something. You will react to it. There will be an emotional response to that conclusion. Right? If you have person of how should I put it? Some people will feel joy. They feel like, wow, as if a burden that they've been carrying with them for lives or for a long time, that burden is now dropped. It's feel relief and joy, overjoy, or bliss. So that is one, the emotional response to coming to that conclusion in an impactful way. I'm most likely, or some other people will feel fear, and teaching is as if something so precious to you has been ripped off and lost and thrown away. So you feel fear. I probably feel a sense of disappointment. Oh, that's a real bummer. You mean I don't get to be immortal? I don't get to live again and again and do this, do that, dilly-dally and enjoy life? No, I can't. Yeah. So why I mentioned the emotional impact is the emotional impact, although it's not the actual conclusion, signal to us how powerful that conclusion is to us, that it has a transformative effect on ourselves because it's able to invoke an emotional response. A lot of time when people use this method, and I studied this method for many years, and most of my experience with it is I don't feel anything at all. No, I can explain the logic to you, like what I sort of say, and blah, 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 blah. I don't feel anything. What does it mean? What does it indicate? It indicate, one is that it hasn't actually taken roots. It hasn't actually bring about a sense of conviction. I might know, only in a very superficial way, the steps of the reason, but the reasoning hasn't actually taken root or having actually bring about a change of mind or change of heart or transformation. Hence, there's no response. It's like blah, 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 blah. Okay, now we arrive at the conclusion is this and that. oh, this permanent soul of Wai Chung doesn't exist. No impact at all, nothing at all. Then, in a way, this method has not worked for me. If that's the case, it hasn't worked because it has not bring about what it's intended to do, which is a change of heart, a change of mind, a change of perspective. I have not found myself now seeing things from a new perspective. I just end up with a whole bunch of words, that's all. And that is the main drawback and the challenge of this method, that you can end up with a lot of words, but not with an insight, a penetrative, profound insight, a profound shift in perspective. Okay, so let's just elaborate a little bit on the reasoning that I use. As you can see, this method is very verbose, right? Talk involves a lot of explanation. And also, sometimes it takes, even after the explanation, even if I can explain it to someone else, it doesn't necessarily mean I have penetrated, I have seized upon the actual reasoning in a way that is transformative for myself. Yeah. So it's I always find that it's very tiring to explain this method, because first it takes a lot of words to unlearn and understand it, and then it also takes just as many words to explain it. And yet, after all this effort, does not necessarily mean that I have bring about a genuine change of perspective. Yeah. By the way, why the body cannot be the permanent soul of Wai Chung? Well, one thing, the body changes, right? I start off as a single cell, then I'm a baby, a toddler, a child, adult. The body is not static. The body changes. How can a changing body be equate with a permanent soul? And every part of the body change. In fact, I once read that every atom in the body is replaced. Either every atom or every cell in the body is replaced every 7 years, which I'm not 100% sure is true, but definitely there's always a lot of changes and upheaval, because cells, our cells, they have a limited lifespan as well, so they die and they need to be replaced. Yeah. So clearly, a changing body cannot be a permanent soul, a permanent self, right? Likewise, a mind consciousness is also changing. Especially if we pay close attention to one moment we might be angry, and next moment we are happy, and next one moment we are sad, the next moment we are, I don't know, we are asleep. Yeah. So conscious experiences are even more undergo rapid change, right? So which moments of consciousness can I point to and say, oh, that is my permanent, unchanging soul, self? And then if the soul is not the body and not the mind, is it possible to have a permanent soul that is separate and different from the body and mind? And that means I should be able to point to it apart from the body, apart from the mind. And what can I point to, really? What can you point to be your permanent soul? And I mean, literally go looking for it. Literally point a finger and say, look, this is, I can point a finger at like a mark and say, here, this is Wai Chung's permanent soul, and it is separate from the body. It is not Wai Chung's mind, and this is it. This is the permanent soul of Wai Chung. And you'll find that you can't point to anything, not anything vague or abstract. You have to literally locate it. Since I claim it exists, I must be able to find it, right? And a common experience is, even though before you inquire, you seem so vivid that I'm so sure that I must have a permanent soul. When you enter into the analysis, it becomes more and more elusive. In fact, the harder you try to find the self or soul, the more elusive it is. Seems to just disappear into thin air. Many years ago, when I was studying, my teacher sent us, we were on a retreat, and sent us around out the hall and said, go and look for yourself. Right? You have 1 hour. I don't care how you do it. Find yourself and bring it back here. Right? So we sat around and walk, and just thinking, what is it? Why or what can I point to? or show or demonstrate and say, here, look, this is my permanent self, my permanent soul. Right? And if you apply this reasoning, which I just very roughly described, and it really take roots in you, you really buy into the argument, you fully accept that reasoning, you will come to a conclusion, a logical conclusion will spontaneously come forth. Oh, you mean there is no permanent soul of Wai Chong? There is no such thing, which is what is supposed to be the correct answer. But it must not come to us just as a repeating of what we expect to be the correct answer or what we have learned to be a correct answer. It must come from a genuine, we ourselves have genuinely go through that inner reasoning process, thinking about it and reasoning about it, and come to a kind of almost like epiphany. Wow, there is no permanent soul here with me. Yeah, and I would say it's quite often accompanied by an emotional response, especially the first time you got it. Yeah. Okay, so that is, in a nutshell, a very brief way of describing how we can realize the true nature of self using a logical reasoning process. It's one of those methods that you really cannot just do a 5 minutes introduction and say, oh, let's do a guided meditation. It's not possible because it involves a lot of study, and you really need to think about it. Think for yourself and think in relation to yourself in order to penetrate into it, in order to grasp. When you can grasp it, the reasoning takes a few seconds. You don't have to write a big long essays about, first you must identify the object of inquiry, and then you must establish its pervation, and then the first reason, the second reason, the third reason, and so on and so forth, and then the conclusion. No, it doesn't work like this. Right? It works like almost, I wouldn't say split second, but it is very fast. It goes from the first to the end to the conclusion in a very fluid and very quick way, because it's a kind of inference process. And when all the parts come together, they come together very quickly. They don't do this sort of big, long expositions and essays. It's like the pieces will click together in your mind. And all you're left with as you go through this rapid process of reasoning is the true conclusion will dawn on you in a very significant way. That's all you need. You don't have to go back to the reasoning and start again. You stick with the conclusion, and it will arise a very clear conclusion. It's like, wow, realizing that you have your car is stolen. I mean, you might not believe in it, therefore you go through the whole process again. But eventually, the full impact of the fact will dawn on you, right? And that's what will stay with you. Touch wood, I hope it never happened to you. Yeah. So that is the genuine conclusion of that logical induction process or reasoning process we've gone through. Right? And the similar thing will happen to us if you apply this method to investigate into the nature of ourself, nature of our soul, whether we do have a kind of permanent self or soul. Okay, so there is a lot of talking about this method. And I almost never lead guided meditation on this method, simply because I've spent at least 30 minutes explaining it, and I didn't even go into all the details of it. But we can explore this idea of using some form of logical reasoning process, or just thinking through it, and to come to some kind of genuine logical conclusion for ourselves. And I propose to do it in relation to a few examples or analogies, which is what the Buddha used. The Buddha used a few analogies to help us grasp the idea of what he's trying to present in relation to this idea of emptiness or selflessness. So let's look at a few of those analogies, and then we can do a meditation on them. Just take a time to turn them over in our mind and see what comes up for each one of us. The first example there's actually a whole series. There is a book that listed out, I think, 12 examples or 12 analogies, which include things like a mirage, an echo, a lightning, water bubble. I don't remember the whole list, okay, but rainbow, optical illusion, probably that's all. Reflection of the on the mirror, reflection in the mirror, and the moon in the water, which is also another reflection, a reflection of the moon in clear still water surface. Yeah. The city of the Gandhava, which I won't go into, is a mythical object, magical illusion. This magical illusion, usually in the Tibetan Buddhist teaching, is sort of some fantastic thing, that I'm not sure it actually exists, but as a magician would chant some mantra on a stick, and then suddenly everybody in the audience would see an elephant. I'm not quite sure about that example, but we can substitute that with modern day magical illusions or magicians on stage performance, and how they create, we can call that an illusion, like David Copperfield walking through the Great Wall of China. You see something that cannot be true, but it looks like they managed to pull it off. So something else. So what it appears is not what the reality is. And that is the key thing about a magical illusion. You see something and hey, yes, that's the appearance of it. That's what I saw, but it can't possibly be, right? Which is why we are amazed at it. We wonder how did the magician manage to pull it off, to pull off this trick, which is a kind of illusion in a sense. How did this person manage to walk through a wall, so to speak? Yeah. So that's my favorite example is the rainbow, because by reflecting on the rainbow, it gave me a sense of what the teaching is trying to get at through this reasoning process, the kind of reasoning process of the emptiness of a permanent self, a permanent essence. So first, let's talk a little bit let's look at a rainbow. So we saw a rainbow, as usually on a rainy day or drizzling day, and we saw this beautiful rainbow in the sky in front of us. And I suppose everyone, when we're young, we take the rainbow. The rainbow is real, but we take the rainbow to be more solid than it is. We think of the rainbow as a bridge, and of course, as any bridge, it has two ends, right? That's where the myth of the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And so what happened is, I wouldn't say when we're young, sometimes even when we're old, we have this sense that the rainbow exists objectively out there. And therefore, if you were to run or drive fast enough, you will be able to arrive at a place where the rainbow, the arc of the rainbow ends or touches the ground. And that's where the mythological pot of gold resides, isn't it? So so if you look at this analogy, the example of rainbow, there is a sense of a very solid, real, independently existing object out there. It's so independent and so real that it will stay put there, and it will give me time to drive and become closer and closer, so that I can actually arrive at the very spot where the arc of the rainbow touches the ground. Right. So just really pay attention to that sense of, which actually is projected onto the reality of the rainbow to us. We see the rainbow as far more solid, concrete, independent, as some kind of permanence to it. You will stay put, it's not going to change. It will stay put long enough for me to approach it and get closer and closer to the rainbow. Of course, we never get closer and closer to the rainbow because that's not how the rainbow exists. So that projected image, which is how, especially when we're young, we hold on to. I think some people, when we're old, we still hold on to this idea of an objectively existing rainbow out there. But we know That's not how rainbow exists. Rainbow has a much more kind of illusory existence. It is the product of, depending on the conditions of light, where the sun is, water droplets, and because it's a refraction of water droplets of the light in this sort of mist of water droplets, and that light enters into our eyes, and we see out there the colored rainbow. Right? But the reality is the rainbow exists, but it doesn't exist in that solid, independent form out there. In fact, every one of us who looking at the same direction will see a different rainbow, because it is actually a product completely dependent on the conditions of the angle of the light, the relative position of the water droplets, and our position, our eyes. So even though someone may be standing next to me, the two of us will look and will see the rainbow, we are actually looking at a different rainbow, because he from his angle will see one, and I from my angle will see a different one. And likewise for other people, we all see a slightly different rainbow, because the rainbow that we saw is produced specifically based on the conditions of the light, the water droplets, and the position, my position, and my eyes. Yeah. And so it has not have an independent objective existence out there, independent on the observers. So it's not as if only one rainbow form out there, and we all look at it from different angles. No, it's different rainbows are formed individually for each one of us. But of course, given the conditions, we all see it roughly in the same direction. Yeah. And that is the tricky bit. And this is why I like this analogy. I will reflect a lot on this analogy and try to get a sense of what the teaching was trying to point us to. It's trying to point out to us that there is an absence of an independently existing rainbow out there. Right. So this later I invite you to think about it. Yeah. Another example could be the classic one is the moon in the water. On a day where, let's say, on a lake, when the water is very still, no ripples, and it's a full moon day, full moon night. The moon is reflected very clearly on the surface or in the water. Yeah. There is a story related to this in the teaching, where it says that a whole bunch of monkeys saw this beautiful silvery dish, in the water, and then mistaken it to be the moon or something nice and attractive. They try to dish it out. So what happened is they climb up onto the tree branch that reaches over the water, and in order to reach the moon in the water, they one will hold on to the other, and then they were sort of like a rope of monkeys reaching down, trying to catch the moon in the water, and then the branch gave way and broke, and all of them plunged into the water, and as the water surface is disturbed, the moon disappeared. And of course, this is an analogy of mistaking the reflection of the moon to be the real moon. Right? There is a reflection there, but it isn't the real moon. In fact, that moon in the water doesn't actually exist independently in the water. It's not as if, which is why we may make a mistake of trying to reach into the water to pick up this moon, because we thought that it exists right there, independently, inherently, objectively out there, so solid that we can reach down and pick it up. Whereas the moment our hands or fingers touches the water and disturb the water surface, we disturb the conditions upon which the water moon, you can call it water moon, rely on in order for its existence. So once those conditions are disturbed, the water moon breaks apart and disappears. Right? And so it is the nature of how the water moon exists that we are interested in. We think that the water moon exists objectively down there in the water, independently, and so solid and so concrete that we can pick it up. Whereas, in fact, the water moon only exists 100% dependent on all these conditions coming together. In fact, once the conditions are disturbed, the water moon disappears. So there is the contrast that we need to see, the difference, and to appreciate the emptiness, the absence of a solid, independent water moon residing down there in the water. Yeah. Just one more example, and then let's try to see whether we can consolidate these different ideas and do a meditation on it. Another example would be, let's say, an echo. What's so fascinating about the echo is you shout into this cave or whatever space it is, and you say hello, and then after a pause, then the word hello come back, right? So the thing about the echo is it seems as if there is another source of sound. There are actually two sources of sound. One is me, I'm the one that shout hello, and then a few seconds later, another sound, the same sound, hello, come back, usually a bit distorted, come back to me. And I might project and think that there is another real, independent, separate source of sound somewhere out there. Nothing to do with me, separate from me, different from this source of the sound. And I might think that there is a real source sound over there, which is the contribute to this second echo, the second sound of hello. Yeah. And of course, we know that is not true. There's only one source of sound, which is me, I'm the one. And of course, the second hello that I heard is a reflection of that sound wave back to myself. Yeah. But nonetheless, this example analogy indicates the mistake. The mistake that I could make is to project another source of sound and hold that there is a real independent source of sound that's independent of me, and as it shows, it's not true. So these are analogies that you don't have to do all of them. Sometimes some analogies speak stronger to us than others. Another one that I just read when I was preparing for this class is the Buddha said that apparently watching the river, the water in the river Ganges or whatever, he saw a lump of foam floating down. Sometimes when water is churned and there are other chemicals or substances inside, they form this layer, this lump of foam that's quite stable. It float down. And he pointed to that lump of foam and say that it looks very solid. It looks like it has some kind of substance. I was thinking the more common example these days in our daily life for this kind of layer of foam is actually with cappuccino. The layer of foam that is on top of your coffee, right? Cappuccino. And it looks very solid and it looks like something substantial, but of course we all know it's mostly just air. Air is thinly coated with a minute layer of water, so to speak, water molecules, so to speak. Yeah. In fact, I have an experience in Singapore where I ordered a cup of cappuccino. Cappuccino came like in almost like a soup bowl, this huge, ginormous bowl, and the layer of foam is so thick, it's like almost like more than half of that ginormous cup. It's just foam. I'm just drinking foam, which of course is nothing, just sucking in air, so to speak. And there is another example that the Buddha gave. This lump of foam, they look or appear to us as so solid, and then almost as if there's some kind of substantial existence to it. There must be some kind of substance, like something more solid or more weight, more resistance, there, because that's how it appears to us. And of course, once you put your finger in, there's almost nothing. And it doesn't have any weight at all. Although it looks like a huge mass, but it actually weighs very, very little. Right? So there is this discrepancy between how it appears or how we project onto it and the reality of it. The reality is all hollow inside. There's nothing inside, nothing substantial. Substantial is the word here. Nothing substantial, nothing solid and substantial inside. Whereas on the outside, it looks as if. So likewise for the self, we feel that there is something substantial. There must be something substantial, something that I can point my finger and say, this is the essence of Waichong, the unchanging essence. This is, I feel that I need it. Otherwise, from one moment to another, from one day to another, I will be different. But where is that Waichong? Am I a different person from one day to another? Given that my body has changed, or my mind has changed, I will be a different person. That would be terrible. Every day, every night, if I were to go to sleep and I will wake up the next day as a different person, it's terrible. There will be there will be many Waichongs. There's I don't know whether it's a horrifying idea or not. Yeah. But the Buddha is saying, well, yeah, in a way, it's not untrue. Because we are changing. The body changes, the mind changes. Of course, in a sense, if I compare me yesterday and today, everything is different. I mean, there is not so different that I cannot recognize. There are still great similarities, but not identity. There are similarities, resemblance, but no identity. Right? And that's what we instinctively grasp at, the identity, the unchanging essence we feel must be here. It's very solid, very substantial. I don't know what it is, but I have a feeling it must be somewhere here. And it gives us false sense of security, of stability, whereas the reality of myself is one of change, ceaseless change. Everything changes. Literally everything changed. The only thing that didn't change in this life is my name. At one point I was thinking of changing my name as well. Yeah. So just the name Waichong, that is same name applied to yesterday's me and today's me and hopefully tomorrow's me. Yeah. The name didn't change, but all the other things has changed. And so within this body and mind, within here, I cannot locate. There isn't any kind of solid, substantial core that is unchanging. And actually, I don't need it. In fact, the Buddha is saying, you don't need this unchanging core. Although we instinctively grasp at it, we feel that it gives us a sense of identity and stability. And whereas the Buddha said, well, first of all, there's no such thing. And secondly, you don't really need it. You have never have it. And you are perfectly fine without it, then now is not a time to try to acquire such a thing. You don't need it. In fact, you will feel more liberated without it. And that really what is the idea. So it's like that, the foam on your cappuccino. Looks very solid and real, and yet when you touch it or you drink it, you realize that, hey, at least for the first layer, there's nothing here. It's hollow. It's nothing substantial here. All right, so that is a very long explanation, an hour, but I hope it gives you some. I try to give you convey a sense of what we're trying to do in this method of using a kind of reasoning, thinking process. We think by applying a kind of a logical reasoning process. We also think by using analogy. To work through analogy. So just to summarize, you can think, reflect, following a few simple steps of the analysis. First, identify this sense of the object of inquiry, the permanent soul, let's say I'm talking about permanent self, which I feel must be here, to which I attach the name Waichong. And this is the one that I have to keep safe because it's going to go to the next life. And I shall live again after death, so to speak. So identifying the object, establishing the pervasion or entailment. Well, if there is such a thing, it must be here, here, or here. All right, and that is it. It must be conclusive and comprehensive. We must be thorough. Right? I'm sure it will be here, 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 3 places or 4 places or whatever number. Right? There's the entailment. And then for each one of them, we reason and say, well, can this be the permanent soul of Wai Chong? Can this be where the permanent soul of Wai Chong resides? And if I establish first, no, not here, not here, not here, and if gone through all possibilities and established with reasonings that it's not possible, then I will come to the logical conclusion that there is no such permanent soul. It is empty of such a permanent soul. Okay? And another way of reflecting is to use, with the help of different images or analogies, turn around in your mind an analogy of rainbow and see whether in relation to this analogy we can catch a sense of what the teaching is trying to say about how there is, first of all, an appearance of a permanent self. In this case, not so much permanent, but a very independent, objectively existing rainbow out there, solidly appearing across the sky, in such a way that, since it's an arc, so both ends, when they touch the ground, that's where my pot of gold would resides. Yeah. And then to investigate, and then based on our understanding of the true nature of rainbow, we realize that no, that's not how the rainbow exists. That might how it appeared to me, or that might be how I previously understood about the rainbow. But as I reflect on how the rainbow itself is a dependently arisen phenomena, emerging from the coming together of changing conditions, and only resides for the short period of time before, when the condition changes, any one of the condition changes, and the rainbow will disappear. And that is the true nature of rainbow. You can never find a rainbow other than one that is 100% dependent on all these conditions. Yeah. And you cannot find a rainbow that somehow can subsist or exist in spite of not having or missing one of those conditions. There's no such thing. Right? And likewise, for example, like a water moon, the moon reflected in water, example of echo, an example of a layer or lump of foam. Right? So I'm not quite sure how we're going to meditate on this, which is why I explained that I normally don't guide meditation using logical reasoning, because first of all, it takes an awful long time to explain the reasoning, and then secondly, you actually need to think for yourself in a way that is unique to yourself, to make sense of that reasoning and to apply it. But I think what we'll do is we're going to do a short meditation and reflect on the nature of our mind and consciousness, and to see whether is it possible that my mind, my consciousness, or rather the continuum of my mind, is it suitable for it to identify as me, as Wai Chong, as something permanently and safe and soundly secured, a solid Wai Chong that I can rely on to go from one life to another? Or maybe not. Maybe there is no such thing as independently, substantially existing Wai Chong to be found or to be identified with as one's own continuum of consciousness. So let's do a meditation on that. I invite you to settle in a suitable meditation posture, one that be sitting or lying down. Allow the back to assume its natural position, upright if you are sitting, straight if you are lying down. Make sure that the posture does not introduce unnecessary pain and discomfort into your body. Instead, allow the body some time to settle into the posture, to get used to the posture. I'm going to ring the bell to signal the start of our meditation. First of all, make sure that the posture feels stable, supportive for the body. So much so that we are able to reassure our body that it is well supported and safe. And this will go a long way to facilitate the body to loosen up, to unwind, to not be so tight and tense, and to let go of some of those unnecessary contractions and tightenings in the different parts of the body. Good to take a few minutes at the beginning of the meditation just to see if we can settle our body and mind down, help them to shift and transition into a more meditative state. And we can do that with the help of the breath. So I invite you to maybe start with a few deep breaths. And as you breathe out, remember to release. So coming back to the breath sensations, allow the breath to settle into its own natural rhythm. We don't have to control it. And see if we can invite our attention to come back and reconnect with the sensations of the breath so that we can fully experience and notice the in-breath and the out-breath. Reconnecting with the breath sensations, noticing the sensations as we breathe in and out. Make use of each out-breath as an opportunity to release. Breathing out, we have to relax the muscles of our diaphragm, the muscles of our chest. So the out-breath is an excellent opportunity for us to release some of the unnecessary physical tensions, such as those in the face. We may have unconsciously tightened some of the muscles in the face, those of the forehead or at the jaw, or muscles around the eyes. Now is a good time to release those tensions. Allow the face to feel so much softer, at ease, relaxed, and comfortable. Breathing out each time we notice the out breath is also an excellent opportunity to release the different thoughts or images or memories, stuff that is pop out in our mind, things that distract our attention from the meditation. We can just gently let them go with the breath. And now, putting aside the breath, feel free to come back to it at any time during this short meditation. If you feel the need to, or if you feel very distracted or confused by what I'm asking you to do, the breath is always here to help to stabilize your attention. help you settle back into meditation. So I'm going to first of all invite you to reflect a little about what we call identifying the object of inquiry. In this case, is our sense of self, who I am. Quite often this sense of self comes with a sense of stability, a sense of permanence to it. So how would you describe your essential self, or who you are? Or in my case, how do I describe who is Wai Chong? What are some of the essential qualities or characteristics I will point out and say, look, this is the summation of all these qualities are what define me for who I am, who Wai Chong is. What are some of my essential, unique qualities and characteristics that will make me who I am as Wai Chong? And if they were to be changed or discarded, I will no longer be who I am. I will no longer be Wai Chong. There are certain qualities and characteristics, could be physical, could be mental, emotional, or whatever come to mind. Give it some thoughts and reflect on your own. See whether you can come up with a short or long list, or even just one item of the essential characteristics of yourself as who you are. So just keep with you this list, short or long, or even if you couldn't think of a single quality, and that's perfectly fine. We're now going to investigate and compare and see if we can identify the self in and among our consciousness, our mind, which I'm going to compare our mind, our consciousness to a river, to compare the continuity of all those moments of consciousness of mind to a physical river. So I invite you to bring to mind, first of all, how a river looks like to you. You can randomly call to mind your own memories of a river, those that you have actual contact with, you have seen, you have ride down rivers. What sort of river you will bring to mind that resemble your continuity of conscious experiences? Just as the river, the actual river, water flowing through on the ground, a river flows through space and time. The river of consciousness flows primarily through time. It is a temporal river. Starting from our earliest memories of conscious experiences, this river of our consciousness has been flowing moment to moment. Recollect some of those moments of conscious experiences in our own life. These are moments or sampling of the river of our consciousness. Moments from when we're really young, moments from we are a teenager, a young adult, recent moments, moments of happiness, moments of suffering and pain, many moments, boring moments, mundane moments. And now I invite you to compare all these many different moments of conscious experiences the moments and parts of your river of consciousness. Compare that with your idea and image of your essential self, with the characteristics of who you are. Which of these moments in your river of consciousness coincide and correspond to that essential self of who you are? So feel free to explore the ideas, the images in your own way. I might give you a few different recommendations, but you're most welcome to ignore them. I'm just suggesting different ideas you might want to try out and test out, and to see if we can help you to come to your own conclusion regarding the relationship between your consciousness, your mind, and your essential self. Are they identical? Are they different and separate? Or what else? Maybe one moment in the river of your consciousness is too short, is too brief. You're not sure whether it is your essential self. Fair enough, join moments together. Is there any section or segment in your life that you can recollect? Segments of days, of months, of years joined together, and you can lay claim and say, that's me, that's my essential self, that is who I am. Period of our life where we feel happy, at peace, at ease. Is that who we really are? Is that my essential self? How about periods of suffering, confusion, pain? Is that who I am? Is that my essential self? Period where I feel healthy, energetic, at ease. Maybe that's who I am. Or period when I'm sick, weak, unhealthy, unhappy. Is that my essential self? If the river of my conscious experiences is an ever-changing phenomena, moments of the moment is ever-changing, is it possible for me to equate it to an unchanging essential self of mine? What sort of relationship I can propose between an ever-flowing, changing river of consciousness and a permanent, unchanging self? And lastly, what happens if I were to compare this self of mine to a rainbow? Then maybe my so-called self is not one fixed, solid, substantial rainbow out there, but maybe at each moment, the coming together of conditions give rise to that unique rainbow of that moment. From moment to moment, there's just many different rainbows. Maybe I don't need one single, permanent, unchanging self after all. So sometimes I wonder, why do I want to live forever? Why do I want to somehow continue unchanged? I don't really think we explicitly say that we want to be unchanged, but implicitly, deep within us, we want to hold to something we feel solid and secure and stable. We find quite disturbing sometimes when things changes a lot. But what's wrong with a rainbow? The rainbow is transient; it doesn't last. But each time, when conditions are right, the rainbow disappears. Spectacular. Why can't my life, and myself, be like a rainbow? Maybe a little bit more, the duration a bit longer. Instead of a few seconds or a few minutes, maybe quite a few decades. I hope I do. I wasn't planning to die anytime soon if I can help it. But in the long time scale of history, maybe my life is just like a rainbow. Nothing substantial, but yet at the same time can be quite spectacular and beautiful. When the conditions are right, the rainbow appears. We can enjoy it, we can be with it. When conditions change and shift, the rainbow disappears. And maybe that's the very nature of, just as there's the nature of the rainbow, maybe there's also the nature of myself. And what's wrong with it? Yeah. Okay, so I leave you with that. This is kind of a second method of cultivating the parameter of wisdom, of understanding emptiness, of special insights. Next week will be the last session of this module, and we'll look at one more method of cultivating wisdom. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a good week ahead, and hope to see you next week. Good night.